What if losing your job was the best thing that ever happened to you? For Anya Sharma, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in debt. A single moment of defiance against a powerful man costs her everything. Fired, humiliated, and hopeless, she goes to bed with nothing but the bitter taste of injustice. But when she wakes up, an unbelievable phone call doesn't just offer her a new job. It offers her an empire. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a waitress, in less than 24 hours, went from serving coffee to becoming the CEO of the very billionaire who tried to break her. The clinking of silverware against fine china was the soundtrack to Anya Sharma's life. It was a symphony of quiet luxury she facilitated, but could never afford to partake in. At 24, her world was confined to the four walls of Aurelia, one of New York City's most pretentious and exorbitantly priced restaurants. It was a place where shadows danced on walls adorned with abstract art that cost more than her college debt, and where the clientele spoke in hushed tones about stock portfolios and summering in the Hamptons. Anya was a ghost in this world, designed to be efficient, polite, and above all invisible. She moved with a practiced grace between the tightly packed tables, her smile a carefully constructed mask that hid the crushing weight of her reality. Her mother's medical bills were a mountain of paper on her small kitchen table, a constant silent testament to the fragility of life and the cruelty of a healthcare system that demanded a fortune for a few more precious years. Her own dreams of finishing her design degree were packed away like old clothes collecting the dust of forgotten ambitions. Each shift was an 8-hour exercise in self-effacement. She'd nod, smile, and refill water glasses, her ears catching snippets of conversations that were alien to her. Mergers, acquisitions, multi-million-dollar deals. It was a language from another planet. Tonight, however, the atmosphere in Aurelia was different. It was charged with an electric tension, a low hum of anticipation that had every staff member on edge. The source of this tension was seated at table 7, the most secluded and sought-after table in the restaurant, with a panoramic view of the glittering Manhattan skyline. His name was Damian Sterling. Even if you didn't know the name, you knew the man. His face was plastered on the covers of business magazines, his net worth a figure with so many zeros it seemed fictional. He was the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, a sprawling global conglomerate with interests in everything from tech to real estate. He was young, impossibly handsome in a sharp, predatory way, and carried with him an aura of untouchable power. He was also, as the staff knew all too well, notoriously difficult. "He's here," whispered Maria, another waitress, as she scurried past Anya, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "And he's in a mood." Anya's stomach tightened. She had been assigned table 7. It was supposed to be a privilege, a chance at a substantial tip that could make a real dent in her bills. But with Damian Sterling, it was a gamble, a high-stakes roll of the dice, where the house, in this case, a petulant billionaire, almost always won. She took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed down her crisp black apron, and approached the table. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Aurelia. May I start you off with some water?" Damian Sterling didn't even look at her. His cold blue eyes were fixed on his phone, his thumb scrolling with aggressive speed. He was flanked by 2 associate sycophants who hung on his every micro-expression. After a deliberate insulting pause, he waved a dismissive hand. "Sparkling, Italian, and don't take all night." The tone was sharp, a slap in the face. It wasn't a request. It was a command laced with the casual arrogance of a man who had never been told no. Anya's smile didn't falter, but a familiar heat pricked at the back of her neck. It was the slow-burning fire of indignation she had to swallow down daily. "Of course, sir," she said, her voice even. As she turned, tall to leave, she overheard one of his associates chuckle. "Heard you closed the fusion tech deal, Damien." Savage. Damien finally looked up from his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. They were begging for it. When you have that much money, they let you do anything. He leaned back, his gaze sweeping across the restaurant with an air of profound boredom, as if everything and everyone in it was a disappointment. His eyes briefly met Anya's as she returned with the water, but there was no recognition. It was like looking at a piece of furniture. The evening progressed in a similar vein. Every interaction was a fresh test of Anya's patience. The wine, a $2,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux, was adequate. The appetizer, a delicate scallop crudo, was uninspired. His complaints were not about the quality of the food or service, but about the very fact that he had to exist in this space, served by lesser beings. He spoke to Anya not as a person, but as a function, an automaton, whose only purpose was to cater to his whims. Anya maintained her composure, her professionalism a shield against his contempt. She had dealt with rude customers before, but there was something different about Damien Sterling. It wasn't just rudeness. It was a fundamental lack of respect for the humanity of those he considered beneath him. He saw the world as a hierarchy with him at the apex, and everyone else as insignificant specks below. As she cleared the main course plates, a small elderly gentleman at a nearby table dining alone caught her eye. He had been watching the unfolding drama at table 7, with a quiet, discerning gaze. He offered Anya a small, sympathetic smile, a silent acknowledgement of her struggle. It was a fleeting moment of connection, a tiny island of kindness in a sea of arrogance, and it gave her a sliver of strength. But the worst was yet to come. The spark of conflict had been ignited, and soon it would erupt into an inferno that would change Anya's life forever. The air grew thick with the cloying sweetness of dessert and the bitter undertones of Damien Sterling's displeasure. He had ordered the restaurant's signature Grand Mariner soufflé, a delicate cloud-like creation that required immense skill and timing. It was a dish designed to impress, to be a final triumphant note in a symphony of culinary excellence. When Anya placed it before him, her movements fluid and precise, Damien stared at it for a long moment before picking up his spoon and plunging it violently into the soufflé's heart, causing it to deflate with a pathetic sigh. "Is this supposed to be a joke?" he snapped, his voice cutting through the restaurant's low hum. Conversations at nearby tables faltered. Diners turned to look, their curiosity piqued by the sudden disturbance. Anya's training kicked in. "Is there something wrong with the soufflé, sir?" she asked, her voice a model of calm concern. "Wrong with it?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "It's trivial. It's a puff of hot air, just like everything else in this place." He gestured around the room. His eyes filled with scorn. "You people spend your lives making this fluff. You think this is important. You think serving me this overpriced egg foam gives your life meaning." His associates shifted uncomfortably. This was beyond his usual brand of arrogance. This was a public spectacle. Anya felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, but her focus was on the man at the table. The mask of professionalism was starting to crack. "I believe our chefs work very hard to provide a memorable experience for our guests, sir," she said, her voice tight. Damien's eyes narrowed, a cruel glint appearing within them. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper that was somehow more menacing than his shouting. "Let me tell you what's memorable. Power, money, changing the world. Not this." He flicked his spoon, sending a dollop of soufflé flying onto the pristine white tablecloth. "This is what you do. You clean up other people's messes. You smile and nod and say, 'Of course, sir,' while your own life is probably a complete and utter disaster." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the slight fraying at the cuff of her sleeve, the faint shadows of exhaustion under her eyes. He saw not a person, but a collection of weaknesses to be exploited. "Tell me." He continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "What sad little story are you hiding behind that fake smile? Sick mother-student loans. A dream you gave up on because you weren't smart enough or talented enough to make it a reality. That was it. The final blow. It wasn't just an insult. It was a violation. He had reached into the raw, protected core of her being and twisted the knife. He had taken her private grief, her silent sacrifices, her most profound insecurities, and thrown them back in her face as a punchline. Something inside Anya snapped. The carefully constructed dam of professionalism, built over years of swallowing her pride, burst. The fire of indignation she had suppressed for so long roared to life, a white-hot inferno that burned away her fear. She stood up straight, her spine turning to steel. The practiced smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold, clear fury. When she spoke, her voice was low, but it carried an authority that silenced the entire room. "You know nothing about me," she said, each word a perfectly enunciated shard of ice. "You sit there in your $1,000 suit, looking down on everyone, and you think your money gives you the right to be cruel. You think it makes you a better person. It doesn't. It just makes you a rich bully." Damien Sterling looked genuinely taken aback, as if a chair had suddenly started speaking to him. His associates stared their mouths agape. Anya took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. "You talk about power. You have no idea what real power is. It's not about intimidating people. It's not about humiliating a waitress to make yourself feel important. That's not power. That's weakness. It's the pathetic cry of a small, insecure man who has to tear others down to feel tall." She gestured to the ruined soufflé. "This isn't just fluff. It's the product of someone's hard work, their passion, their dedication. Things you clearly wouldn't understand. My life?" She continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, but losing none of its strength is not a disaster. It has dignity. It has meaning. And it is worth more than all the money you could ever possibly accumulate. Because it is built on respect and integrity, two things you couldn't buy if you wanted to. A gasp rippled through the onlookers. The restaurant manager, a perpetually flustered man named Mr. Dubois, came rushing over, his face pale with panic. "Miss Sharma!" "What is the meaning of this?" he hissed, grabbing her arm. Damien Sterling slowly rose to his feet, a storm brewing in his eyes. He had never been spoken to like this in his entire life. The shock was quickly being replaced by a volcanic rage. "Get her out of my sight," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Mr. Sterling." "I am so sorry," Mr. Dubois stammered, bowing and scraping. He turned to Anya, his face contorted with fury. "You are feared. Fired. Get your things and leave immediately. You will never work in this city again." He tried to pull her away, but Anya stood her ground. She looked one last time at Damien Sterling, not with hatred, but with a kind of pity. She had seen the hollow man behind the billions. Then, without another word, she turned her back on the most powerful man in the room, on the ruins of her career, and walked away. The silence that followed her was deafening. As she passed the table where the elderly gentleman sat, he discreetly caught her eye and gave a slow, deliberate nod of profound respect. In that moment, it was the only validation she needed. She had lost her job, but for the first time in a long time, she hadn't lost herself. The sharp click of the restaurant's back door shutting behind her was the sound of a chapter ending. The cool night air hit Anya's flushed cheeks, a stark contrast to the heated, suffocating atmosphere she had just escaped. The adrenaline that had surged through her during the confrontation began to recede, leaving a cold, creeping dread in its wake. She walked through the grimy back alley, the stench of garbage replacing the aroma of gourmet food. Her footsteps echoed on the wet pavement, each one a hammer blow of reality. Fired. The word ricocheted around her skull. Not just fired, but publicly humiliated and theatrically dismissed. Mr. Dubois' threat. "You will never work in this city again," felt less like an exaggeration and more like a prophecy, especially with a man like Damien Sterling as her enemy. The subway ride home was a blur. The vibrant, chaotic energy of New York City, usually a source of comfort for Anya, felt alienating and hostile. The faces of the other passengers were a gallery of anonymous strangers, each lost in their own world, oblivious to the fact that hers had just imploded. She clutched the strap of her worn tote bag, her knuckles white. Insint was her uniform, hastily bundled up, a symbol of a life that was now in the past. Her apartment was a tiny shoebox in Queens, the kind of place where you could boil water on the stove while still sitting on the bed. It was small, but it was hers. Tonight, however, it felt like a cage. The mountain of mail on her kitchen table seemed to have grown in her absence. She saw the familiar red-bordered envelopes of overdue notices, the stark official letterhead of the hospital's billing department. A wave of nausea washed over her. How was she going to pay for any of this now? The tip from a regular table at Aurelia could cover her groceries for a week. A good night could make a utility payment. The potential tip from Damien Sterling's table, had things gone differently, could have been a lifeline. Now there was nothing. She sank onto her lumpy sofa, the springs groaning in protest. The silence of the apartment was deafening, amplifying the frantic, panicked thoughts racing through her mind. She had stood up for her dignity, and she didn't regret it. In the heat of the moment, it had felt like the only choice. But dignity didn't pay rent. Integrity didn't buy medicine. A tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek. Then another, and another. Soon she was consumed by silent, body-racking sobs. It was a release of all the pent-up frustration, the fear, the exhaustion of constantly struggling to stay afloat in a city that was determined to drown her. She cried for her lost job, for her mother's failing health, and for the bright, hopeful girl she had once been, the one who believed that hard work and a good heart were enough. After what felt like an eternity, the tears subsided, leaving her feeling hollowed out and raw. She listlessly reached into the pocket of her apron, which she had thrown onto the cushion beside her, looking for a tissue. Her fingers brushed against a small, stiff rectangle of cardstock. She pulled it out, her brow furrowing in confusion. It was a business card. It was thick, made of a heavy, cream-colored paper that felt expensive to the touch. The design was minimalist and elegant, a simple embossed silver crest, an intertwined A and S, and beneath it, a name and a phone number. Arthur Sterling, personal line. The name hit her like a physical blow. Sterling. It couldn't be. A relative of Damien's. A cruel joke. She tried to remember where it could have come from, and then the image of the elderly gentleman dining alone flashed in her mind. The one who had watched the entire scene unfold. The one who had given her that quiet nod of approval as she walked out. He must have slipped it into her apron pocket as she passed his table. She stared at the card, her mind reeling. Arthur Sterling. It wasn't a name she recognized from the gossip columns or business journals. Damien was the face of the empire. Who was this man? And why had he given her his personal number? Hope, a dangerous and unfamiliar emotion, began to flicker in the darkness of her despair. It was a tiny, fragile flame, but it was there. What did he want? To offer his sympathy. To offer a reference, perhaps to counteract the damage Damien would surely inflict on her reputation. For a long moment, she just sat there, the card resting in her palm. It felt impossibly heavy, a tangible piece of a world she had only ever observed from the outside. Every instinct told her to be wary. The name Sterling was now synonymous with pain and humiliation. This could be another trap, another game played by the rich and powerful for their own amusement. But then she thought of her mother's face, of the stack of bills on her table, of the terrifying void that was her future. What did she have left to lose? Her job was gone. Her reputation was likely in tatters. She was already at rock bottom. With a trembling hand, she reached for her phone. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she keyed in the numbers. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the call button. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she closed her eyes and pressed it, not knowing that this single desperate act was about to change the trajectory of her life in a way she could never have imagined. The phone began to ring. The phone rang once, twice. Each ring echoed in the tense silence of Anya's apartment, amplifying the frantic beating of her own heart. She was half expecting a secretary to answer, or perhaps an automated voicemail. She had already started rehearsing a nervous, rambling message in her head. Then on the third ring, a voice answered. It was not the crisp, efficient tone of an assistant, but the warm, slightly gravelly voice of an older man. "Hello." Anya's breath hitched. It was him, the man from the restaurant. "Hello," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Sterling. Arthur Sterling." There was a soft chuckle on the other end of the line. "The very same. And to whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?" "My name is Anya Sharma. You gave me your card. Tonight, at Aurelia." "Ah, Miss Sharma. I was hoping you would call," he said, his tone kind and reassuring. "I must confess I was quite impressed by you this evening." Anya was taken aback. Impressed. She had caused a scene, lost her temper, and been unceremoniously fired. "Impressed, sir? I'm not sure what there was to be impressed by. I lost control." "Nonsense," Arthur Sterling replied, his voice firm but gentle. "You didn't lose control. You found your voice. In a world where most people cower and placate in the face of wealth and power, you chose to stand for something. You chose dignity. That, my dear girl, is not a loss of control. It is the very definition of strength." Tears welled in Anya's eyes, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude. To hear her actions framed not as a failure, but as an act of courage was a balm to her wounded spirit. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much that means to me." "Please call me Arthur," he insisted. "And I think I do have some idea. I watched my son tonight, and I felt a great sense of shame. What you did, it was a lesson he sorely needed to witness. Whether he learns from it is another matter entirely." His son. The confirmation sent a jolt through Anya. This was Damien Sterling's father. But his tone held no defense for his son's behavior, only a profound, weary disappointment. "I apologize for his behavior, Anya," Arthur continued. "There is no excuse for such cruelty and arrogance. You don't have to apologize for him, sir." "Arthur," she corrected herself. "Perhaps not, but I feel a certain responsibility." He paused, and Anya could hear him take a breath before his tone shifted, becoming more businesslike, yet still retaining its warmth. "Listen, Anya. The reason I gave you my card was not merely to offer my sympathies. I believe that true character, is the most valuable asset a person can possess. It's rarer than platinum and more precious than any stock certificate. And you have it in spades." Anya's heart began to race again, but this time with a bewildering sense of anticipation. Where was this going? "I have a proposition for you," Arthur said. "It is unconventional, and it may sound insane, but I would be honored if you would meet with me to discuss it." A meeting. A proposition. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. Was he going to offer her a new job? A management position in one of his hotels, perhaps? Even that seemed too good to be true. "A meeting," she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course. Yes. I would like that very much." "Excellent," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Are you available tomorrow morning? Say 9 o'clock. "Yes, absolutely." "Good. Do you know the Sterling Tower on Park Avenue?" Anya's stomach did a nervous flip. The Sterling Tower was the gleaming, monolithic headquarters of Damien's global empire. It was a symbol of corporate power, a fortress she had only ever seen from the outside. "Yes, I know it. I'll have my assistant Eleanor meet you in the lobby. She'll know who you are. Just ask for her at the main reception desk. She will bring you up to my office." His office, in the Sterling Tower. The building helmed by the very man who had orchestrated her downfall. The irony was staggering. "Okay," Anya said, writing down the details on the back of an envelope, her hand shaking slightly. 9 o'clock. Sterling Tower. Eleanor. Precisely. Get some rest, Anya. You've had a difficult night. Tomorrow, I believe, will be a much better day. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine, my dear. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. With that, he ended the call. Anya slowly lowered her phone, her gaze distant. The small, cramped apartment no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a launch pad. The silence was no longer deafening. It was filled with the hum of possibility. She looked at the business card, still clutched in her other hand. Arthur Sterling, a man of immense, yet quiet, power. A man who saw value not in bank statements, but in character. A man who was offering her something. She had no idea what to expect. The rational part of her brain warned her not to get her hopes up, that this could all be a misunderstanding, a prelude to a minor offer, or even a disappointment. But as she stood up and walked over to her small closet to find something to wear, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years began to bloom in her chest. It was a wild, audacious, and terrifying feeling. It was hope, but not the fragile, flickering kind from before. This was a roaring flame ignited by a single, unexpected call that promised to turn the coldest of endings into the most astonishing of beginnings. Tomorrow was no longer a void. It was a destination. The next morning, Anya stood before the Sterling Tower, a monument of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the heavens. It was designed to intimidate, to make one feel small and insignificant. Just 24 hours earlier, the idea of walking through its revolving doors would have been unthinkable. Today she was an invited guest. She wore her only interview outfit, a simple but elegant black dress she'd bought from a thrift store years ago, a pair of scuffed but polished heels, and a borrowed blazer. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore minimal makeup, determined to present herself with a quiet confidence she didn't entirely feel. Taking a deep breath, she walked into the lobby. It was a cathedral of corporate power. The floors were gleaming marble, the ceilings impossibly high, and a massive abstract silver sculpture, vaguely resembling the crest from Arthur's card, dominated the center of the space. Men and women in sharp, expensive suits moved with a brisk, purposeful energy, their faces set with ambition. Anya felt a pang of self-consciousness, the ghost of the invisible waitress. But then she remembered Arthur's words. That is the very definition of strength, and she straightened her shoulders, walking purposefully to the main reception desk, a long, imposing slab of granite manned by 3 equally imposing receptionists. "Good morning," Anya said to the nearest one. "I'm here to see Arthur Sterling. My name is Anya Sharma. I believe his assistant Eleanor is expecting me." The receptionist, a woman with severely styled blonde hair and a skeptical expression, looked her up and down, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. The name Arthur Sterling was clearly not one she heard often. It was a name from the company's history, a phantom from the past. Damien was the king of this castle. "One moment," the receptionist said, her tone cool. She typed something into her computer, her expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. "Oh. Yes. Miss Sharma. Eleanor is on her way down." A few moments later, a poised, silver-haired woman in her late 60s with kind eyes and a warm smile approached Anya. "Miss Sharma. I'm Eleanor Vance. It's a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Sterling is waiting for you. Please follow me." Eleanor led Anya past the security turnstiles to a private elevator. As they ascended the city unfolding beneath them, Eleanor spoke. "I've worked for Arthur for over 40 years, she said, her voice soft. "I haven't seen him this animated about something in a long time. You made quite an impression on him." "He's a very kind man," Anya replied, her nerves starting to fray again. The elevator opened directly into a vast, sun-drenched office. It was nothing like she had expected. While the rest of the building was a testament to cold modern power, this office was warm and inviting. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. The furniture was classic and comfortable, and the air smelled of old paper and lemon polish. It was a sanctuary of wisdom and contemplation in the heart of a corporate jungle. And sitting in a large leather armchair by the window looking out over the city was Arthur Sterling. He turned as they entered, a genuine smile lighting up his face. He was dressed not in a suit, but in a comfortable cashmere sweater and slacks. He looked more like a beloved university professor than a titan of industry. Anya. "Thank you for coming," he said, rising to his feet and walking toward her, his hand outstretched. "Please have a seat. Can Eleanor get you some coffee? Tea? Tea would be lovely." "Thank you," Anya said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and steady. As Eleanor quietly prepared the tea, Arthur gestured for Anya to sit in the armchair opposite his. For a few moments he was silent, his gaze thoughtful as he studied her. "I owe you an explanation," he began. "You're probably wondering why I've brought you here to the headquarters of a company run by the man who had you fired." "The thought had crossed my mind," Anya admitted, with a small, nervous smile. Arthur chuckled. "I founded Sterling Enterprises 50 years ago. I built it from the ground up on a foundation of hard work, innovation, and most importantly, integrity. I believed that a company should be more than just a profit machine. It should be a force for good, a creator of value for its employees and its community, not just its shareholders." He sighed, a look of deep sadness crossing his features. "I retired 10 years ago and handed the reins to my son Damien. I had hoped he would carry on that legacy. Instead, he has turned it into his personal kingdom. He runs it on fear and greed. He sees people as pawns to be manipulated, resources to be exploited. Last night at that restaurant was not an aberration. It was a perfect encapsulation of the man he has become. He has the Sterling name, but he has lost the Sterling character." Anya listened, captivated. This was a family drama playing out on a global stage, a story of a father's disappointment and a son's corruption. For years, Arthur continued, his voice growing stronger. "I have been a silent observer, a ghost in my own machine. I own 51% of this company. I am the majority shareholder. A fact my son conveniently forgets. I have the power to make changes. But I have been waiting for the right catalyst, the right person to help me steer this ship back on course. I cannot do it myself. My health is not what it once was. I needed a successor, someone with a moral compass so strong it could not be broken, someone with courage, someone who understands the value of dignity and respect." He leaned forward, his eyes so different from his son's, filled with a powerful conviction. "Last night, Anya, I found that person." Anya's heart stopped. The air in the room seemed to vanish. She stared at him, her mind refusing to process the implication of his words. It was impossible. It was insane. "Arthur, what are you saying?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Arthur Sterling smiled, a look of profound certainty on his face. "I am saying, Miss Anya Sharma, that I have been searching for a new CEO for my company, and I have found her." The revelation hung in the air, a shocking, earth-shattering pronouncement. He wasn't offering her a management job. He wasn't offering her a position. He was offering her the crown. "I have called an emergency meeting of the board of directors for 10 o'clock this morning." Arthur continued, his voice calm and steady, as if he were discussing the weather. "As the majority shareholder, I have the authority to override the board and appoint a new chief executive officer. Damien will be removed from his position, effective immediately." He looked directly at Anya, his expression unwavering. "The position is yours, Anya, if you will accept it." Anya felt the world tilt on its axis, from waitress to CEO, in less than a day. It was a plot from a wild, unbelievable novel. But the look in Arthur Sterling's eyes, the quiet determination in his voice, the sheer, stunning reality of the moment, it was all real. He was giving her the power to change her life, to change the lives of thousands of employees, and to stand on equal footing with the very man who had tried to crush her. The ultimate reversal. The ultimate justice. The hour between Anya's acceptance and the board meeting was a surreal whirlwind. Eleanor, with brisk efficiency, became her guide and guardian angel. She provided Anya with a company tablet already loaded with a high-level overview of Sterling Enterprises, its divisions, its key executives, its current financial standing, and a summary of recent problematic projects initiated by Damien. "Arthur wants you to be prepared, but he doesn't expect you to be an expert," Eleanor explained, her voice a calming presence in the storm of Anya's thoughts. "Your strength isn't in your knowledge of corporate finance. It's in your character. That is what you bring to the table today. Let that be your anchor." Anya's head was spinning. She read about supply chain logistics, quarterly earnings reports, and hostile takeover bids. The numbers were astronomical, the jargon a foreign language. But beneath the corporate speak, she saw a story. She saw factories with poor working conditions, a corporate culture that rewarded ruthlessness and a focus on short-term profit at the expense of long-term stability and ethics. It was Damien's philosophy writ large, and it was, as Arthur had said, a corruption of the company's original vision. At precisely 10 o'clock, Arthur, with Anya by his side and Eleanor a discreet step behind, walked into the main boardroom. It was a cold, sterile room, dominated by a massive, polished mahogany table. Seated around it were a dozen men and women, the board of directors. They were the titans of this world, their faces a mixture of confusion, irritation, and intrigue at this unscheduled meeting. And at the head of the table, looking impatient and annoyed, sat Damien Sterling. When he saw his father enter, his annoyance morphed into disbelief, which quickly curdled into fury when he saw Anya walking beside him. "Father, what is the meaning of this?" Damien demanded, his voice sharp. His eyes shot to Anya, his lip curling in a sneer. "And what is she doing here? Did she come to serve the coffee?" A few of the board members chuckled nervously, looking from Damien to Arthur, sensing a seismic family power struggle about to erupt. Arthur Sterling ignored his son. He took his place at the opposite end of the table, a position that had been left symbolically vacant for years. Anya stood to his right. The room fell silent. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." Arthur began, his voice calm but resonant, with an authority that had been dormant for too long. "I have called this emergency meeting today in my capacity as majority shareholder of Sterling Enterprises." He let that statement hang in the air, a reminder of the true power structure of the company. "For 10 years, I have entrusted the leadership of this company to my son. I had hoped he would build upon its foundations. Instead, he has chipped away at them, replacing a culture of respect with one of fear, and a vision for sustainable growth with a hunger for reckless profit. This company is sick. Its soul is sick. And I am here today to administer the cure." Damien's face was a mask of thunderous rage. "This is absurd. You are retired. You have no say in the day-to-day operations of this company. I have 51% of the say." "Damien," Arthur countered, his voice like ice, "and my shares give me the right to protect my investment. Pursuant to Section 7B of the corporate bylaws, the majority shareholder has the right to call a vote of no confidence in the CEO, and should that vote pass, to appoint a successor. I am exercising that right. Today. He looked around the table, his gaze meeting that of each board member. I am calling for the immediate removal of Damien Sterling as Chief Executive Officer of this company. A wave of shocked murmurs went through the room. This was a corporate coup orchestrated by the company's reclusive founder. "This is insane," Damien roared, slamming his hand on the table. "She put you up to this," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Anya. "This little social climbing, nobody has somehow poisoned your mind." Anya met his gaze without flinching. Her heart was pounding, but on the outside she was a portrait of calm resolve. Arthur raised a hand for silence. "Miss Sharma has done nothing of the sort. She has, however, shown me what this company has lost. She has reminded me that integrity is not a liability to be discarded, but the single most important asset we can have. That is why upon Damien's removal, I am appointing her as his successor." If the first announcement had been a shockwave, this one was a nuclear explosion. The boardroom erupted. Cries of preposterous, impossible, and is this a joke filled the air. One of the board members, a hawk-faced man named Harrison Vance, exclaimed, "Arthur, with all due respect, she's a waitress. She has no experience, no qualifications." "Her qualifications," Arthur stated firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos, "are precisely what this company needs. She is not a member of the elite. She has not been corrupted by wealth or power. She understands the value of hard work. She has more courage and integrity in her little finger than many of us have in this entire room. She will learn the business, and we will support her. But her character, that is something that cannot be taught." He turned to Anya. "Miss Sharma, would you like to say anything?" This was her moment. Anya stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked not at Damien, but at the stunned faces of the board members. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Mr. Vance is right. I am not like you. I haven't spent my life in boardrooms. I've spent it serving people. I've spent it listening, and I've spent it watching. And what I've seen is that true value isn't created by squeezing every last drop of profit from your employees or cutting corners to please shareholders. It's created by building something people believe in." She finally turned her gaze to Damien. "You asked me last night what gives a person's life meaning. This does. The chance to build a company that treats its people with respect. A company that innovates with a conscience. A company that we can all be proud of. I may not have an MBA, but I have a vision. And I am not afraid of hard work." Her simple, heartfelt words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the usual corporate doublespeak. Arthur smiled. "The vote is a formality, but let us proceed. All those in favor of the immediate removal of Damien Sterling." He raised his hand. For a moment, no one else moved. Then slowly, one by one, seeing the writing on the wall and the unshakable resolve of the majority shareholder, other hands went up. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. Damien Sterling stared in utter disbelief, his face ashen. He had been dethroned, usurped, humiliated by the very woman he had scorned less than 24 hours earlier. "You will regret this," he seethed, his voice a venomous whisper as he pushed his chair back and stormed out of the room. "All of you." The door slammed shut behind him. An era was over. Arthur Sterling turned to the stunned board, and then to Anya. He smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to your new CEO." Anya Sharma's first day as CEO of Sterling Enterprises was not spent in her new cavernous office, the one Damien had just vacated, filled with sterile modern art and an oversized egotistical desk. Instead, she spent it in the trenches. Her first act was to request the employee files for the Aurelia restaurant staff. By noon, she had personally called a bewildered Mr. Dubois. She did not fire him. Instead, she informed him that his yearly bonus would now be tied directly to employee satisfaction scores, and that Sterling Enterprises, which owned the parent company of the restaurant, was implementing a new company-wide policy, a zero-tolerance stance on the abuse of staff by any patron, regardless of their net worth. The customer, she informed him, is not always right. Her next move was even more audacious. Armed with the information Eleanor had provided, she flew not by private jet, but commercial to a manufacturing plant in Michigan that was slated for closure by Damien, a cost-cutting measure that would have decimated a small town. She walked onto the factory floor, not in a power suit, but in jeans and a simple blouse. She didn't speak to the plant manager first. She spoke to the line workers. She asked them about their jobs, their families, their ideas. She listened to their concerns about outdated equipment and inefficient processes that Damien's top-down management had ignored. That evening in the factory's drab break room, she held a meeting with the entire staff. She announced that the plant was not closing. Instead, the company would be making a significant investment in new technology and in retraining programs based directly on the feedback she had received that day. The money for the investment, she explained, would be reallocated from the executive bonus pool and the budget for the corporate jet fleet. The news was met with stunned silence, then an eruption of cheers and applause that shook the building. For the first time in a decade, these employees felt seen, heard, and valued. They weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were partners in the company's success. Of course, not everyone was cheering. Back in New York, a wave of resistance was building. Executives loyal to Damien engaged in subtle acts of sabotage, losing important files, questioning her every decision in meetings, and leaking snide remarks to the financial press about the Waitress CEO. They saw her compassion as weakness and her ethics as naive. Anya met this resistance not with an iron fist, but with unwavering resolve and transparency. In her first company-wide town hall broadcast to every Sterling office around the globe, she laid out her vision. For too long, she said, looking directly into the camera, this company has been driven by a single question: how can we make more money? From today, we will be driven by a different set of questions. Are we doing the right thing? Are we treating our people with dignity? Are we creating something of lasting value? And yes, are we profitable? But profit will be the result of our integrity, not the reason for it. She implemented sweeping changes. She established a generous parental leave policy, raised the minimum wage for all employees company-wide to a living wage, and created an independent ethics committee with real power. She launched the Sterling Foundation, funded by 10% of the company's annual profits, dedicated to causes her employees could vote on. Arthur, watching from the sidelines, was filled with a pride he had not felt in years. He acted as her mentor, guiding her through the complexities of corporate governance. But he never interfered with her decisions. He had chosen her for her character, and he trusted her instincts completely. The turning point came 3 months into her tenure. A rival corporation, seeing the internal turmoil at Sterling Enterprises, launched a hostile takeover bid, assuming the Waitress CEO would be easy prey. The financial world watched, expecting the company to crumble. But they had underestimated Anya, and more importantly, they had underestimated the loyalty she had built. The factory workers in Michigan, hearing the news, organized a media campaign telling the world how the new CEO had saved their town. Employees from every division began publicly defending their company and their leader. The board, who had initially been skeptical, saw the surge of morale and the positive public perception. They saw a company that was no longer sick but healing. They rallied behind her unanimously. Anya didn't just defeat the takeover bid. She used the momentum to launch a new innovative green technology initiative that had been shelved by Damien. The project was a massive success, rocketing the company's stock to an all-time high and proving that ethical business was good business. Anya Sharma never lost the humility of her past. She still preferred tea to champagne and would often eat lunch in the company cafeteria, talking to everyone from janitors to department heads. She had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into a force for good, proving that true power isn't about the title on your door or the money in your bank account. It's about the strength of your character and the courage to build a world and a company where everyone is treated with dignity. She wasn't just the CEO. She was the conscience of Sterling Enterprises, a new beginning forged in the fire of injustice. Anya's incredible journey proves that your circumstances don't define your destiny. In just 24 hours, she went from being fired and humiliated to taking control of a global empire, not with an MBA, but with unwavering integrity and courage. She faced down a billionaire bully and didn't just win. She changed the entire game, reminding us all that true power lies in how we treat others. Her story is a powerful testament to the fact that one person armed with principle and purpose can reshape the world. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by their job. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story about ordinary people who did extraordinary things. What did you think of Anya's first move as CEO? Let us know in the comments below.